So this is a spreadsheet. Obviously, I'm hoping you've got some basic skills with the spreadsheet. A couple little things first. There's a little button here, the FX button. You will need to use functions. If you haven't used functions before, if you click on this little button, I'm inside a cell right now. If you click on that button in the cell that I want to create a function, do a calculation, it will bring up this box, and Excel can pretty much do anything that you will want to do. So for example, down here, the third option, because I've done it before, but I could type it. If I wanted to do a binomial probability calculation, I just start typing binomial and click go, and it will come up with frequency. There we go. So it'll come up with a load of different binomial ones. And then down here, it tells me about what that does. There's a bit of a mix up at the moment because it will have the old Excel functions and the newer Excel, and I say newer quite loosely. It hasn't been a new Excel for about 3 years, but it's got old ones from the 90s and and 15 years ago. So you just got to find the one that's going to work for you and then use it. But luckily for you, your functions that you'll probably need to use will be quite simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a spreadsheet that will do a trapezoidal rule calculation for 4 strips. So I've done that. On the board here, you won't be able to see this on a video, but on the board I'm going to draw that function, and you might want to draw it somewhere as well. Let's do a trapezoidal calculation for the function y equals x squared plus 7. So that's 7, and I want to do it between 0 and 2. And I want to calculate this area below it, but I'm going to do, instead of an integration, I'm going to do a trapezoidal rule for 4 strips. So because it's 4 strips, I'm going to have to first have my x values. So I'm going to call this column my x values, and 4 strips will mean I have a 0th x value, a first, a second, a third, and a fourth. So in terms of on the board here, I'm cutting up into 4 strips, 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got the 0th value. This is my H0, H1, H2, H3, and H4. Now, in your trapezoidal rule calculation, you'll need to know the width first of all. So you can obviously calculate the width pretty easily. If you want to automate that, you can have a width calculation over here. So my width will equal, so I type in equals there. Again, I can I can press the FX button to get calculations, but this is a fairly simple one. I just want my upper bound minus my lower bound. So what I might do is I might call that, I might do a cell reference here so I can create a width from a given upper bound and lower bound. So I can actually change my Excel calculation. So what I might do is over here, I'll set up an upper bound cell and a lower bound cell. And then these are the bits that I'll place numbers in. So in my upper bound, I'm going to put 2. In my lower bound, I'm going to put 0. And then here I'll set up a number of strips. So these again are my variables. And I'm going to do 4 strips. And my width will be equal to the upper bound, which is cell K1. You can see that highlighted blue there. Cell K1 is my upper bound. Minus my lower bound, which is cell K2. And then I want to divide that by the number of strips. And that will be my width. But in this case, order of operations tells me I have to do this subtraction first, so I need to put brackets around that to make sure the division works. So I'm just going to pop some brackets around that, K1 minus K2 over the number of strips, which is K3, and that tells me my width is 0.5. And so this is automated now, and we'd like you to head towards some level of automation, but this is not an Excel assignment. This is a maths assignment, but we'd like you to make it as easy as possible for yourself. If I wanted to change the upper bound now, I want to calculate 4 strips, but I want to go from 0 to 10. I can just put 10 in the upper bound cell, and it will recalculate my width. That's what Excel will do for you. I'm sure some of you have had experience with this kind of thing, but I always find that some people haven't. So I'll go back to 2 here. Does anyone have any questions yet? Now, the next thing I need to do the trapezoidal rule calculation is over here. I need to calculate the heights. So I've got my x values. Well, actually, I have my x positions. So I should actually change this title to x. Also, I'll call it the h values. So this is h0, h1, h2, h3, h4. and then I'll do my x values, because you need to know what your x values are, and then I'll do my y values, which will be my heights. So this is my 0th, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, but what I actually need to know is my x values at those times. So in this case, my x value for the first one is at 0, because I can see that on here. My x value for the second one is at 0.5, because my width is 0.5, so I want to move 0.5 up. So what I'm going to do is, instead of writing 0.5, I'm going to start them at 0. So I'm going to start them at the lower bound, which is K2. So I'm automating this again as much as possible. I'm starting it at K2, and then for each extra cell, I'm going to do my lower bound, which is my previous cell, B2, plus the width, which is H1. So this is formula driven again, and you can see it's done that calculation for me. It's getting the previous cell, and it's adding the width, which is 0.5 under that previous cell. Now, for 4 strips, this is pretty trivial, but you're probably going to want to do a calculation for 100 strips. So I'm going to show you how to shortcut this so that you can just drag the function down. You have to be a little bit clever about it. Each time I move down, I want to add 0.5 to the cell above. But I don't want to just do plus 0.5, because if I change my upper bound, my width will change, and then I have to go back to here and change 0.5. So I want to automate this as much as possible. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to change this function. I'm going to leave B2 the same, but I'm going to change H1 to be $1. Has anybody seen the use of the dollar sign in Excel before? Okay, so this will be important to you. What that's going to do is, when I drag the function down, B2 will also drag down, will become B3, B4, B5, but H1 will not drag down. The dollar sign keeps it still. Otherwise, if it drags down, it becomes just 0. So you want that one to stay the same, but you want this one to move down so it's adding to the previous cell. So if I press enter there, it won't change that value. But if I drag this down, it creates that 0, 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2. And if I click on one of these cells, you can see what's highlighted. So I click in here. It's got the previous cell, in this case B4. So when I dragged it down, it changed it from B2 to B3 to B4, etc. And it's added $8.1, which keeps it at H1. It doesn't change that cell. So now I've got my widths correct. Oh, yeah, my X value is correct. That's, again, these are fairly simple functions, but you've got to know the little nuanced things like using a dollar sign. Otherwise, you end up having to go in and type in stuff constantly, and you don't want to do that. If you make a slight change, you want it to be automated. We're almost done now. At x equals 0, I need to know the height of my trapezium lower bound. So to do that calculation, I'm actually going to use my function. Remember I said my function was x squared plus 7? So I'm going to type in here that my y value is equal to my x value, which is B2 squared. Now to do squared in Excel, you have to use the hat symbol. It's shift 6. So the hat, it looks at that little hat. If you've got your laptop open, you'll see that little hat symbol. It's just above the 6 key, I believe. Squared, that will do squared, plus 7, and it will do that calculation for me. Now, because I haven't put a dollar sign in there, when I get this little box in the corner and drag it down, it will do that calculation for me the whole way down. So this has got 0 squared plus 7 is 7. Half squared plus 7 is 7.25. 1 squared plus 7 is 8. 1.5 squared plus 7 is 9.25. So on and so forth. Now I've got all my heights. So on here, I've now got my height of 7. That's 7.25. That's 8. That's 9.25. And that is 11. Got all my heights. Now I can apply the trapezoidal rule. Remember, the trapezoidal rule is that the area is approximately equal to width over 2 times the ends plus 2 times the middle. Now you can automate this further so that you can make it work when you change the number of strips. But I'm actually, that's a fairly large step up to do that automation. And I encourage you to do it, but you won't get marked up or down for doing that. I'm just going to create the function. I'm going to type in here area equals, and it's going to be equal to width over 2, which is H1 over 2, multiplied by, and I just need to make sure that's in brackets to make sure it does the right thing, So it can be a bit frustrating. You've got to be in here to get the brackets right. So multiply by that times, if you want to multiply in Excel, you need to use the star symbol. The star symbol is Shift 8. It's above the 8 key. And I'm putting this function in. My end values are in the C column. My end values are C2 and C6. So I'm going to do C2 plus C6 plus 2 times my middle values, which are C3 plus C4 plus C5. Now there is a summing button as well, so it's a summing function. So you could be clever here and you could do a sum in there, and you're going to want to do a sum when you do 100 strips. So I'll show you that in a second. I'll show you the calculation again with a sum. But for now, if I press enter, that gives me my calculated area based on a trapezoidal rule. There. So in terms of the sum, if I did that again, but with the sum, I'll show you this just so you've seen it. In here, instead of doing C3 plus C4 plus C5, I could do sum of, and then I can do C3 and then a colon C5, and it will sum every value from C3 to C5. Okay, or you can select those values as well. So if I deleted this, because I'm inside my sum at the moment, I can just highlight them and it will do C3 to C5. I could sum right down to here or wherever I want to. Thank you. Sure. I get the same answer. So you can set that up to do your trapezoidal rule. The good thing about this now, though, is if I change my upper bound to 10 again, it will change my area calculation. Watch the whole thing change. Now I've got an area estimation of 413 units squared, which we'd expect because we go right up to 10. A lot bigger of an area. If I change my lower bound to 9, you can see my width has now changed 0.25, and it's calculated that area as 97.34. 375. That's pretty much everything you need to know. What I might just do is do a quick run through in terms of adapting this to do 100 strips and show you that, and then I'm going to stop and leave it there. But of course, don't forget you can ask me anytime you want. Some of you will find it easy and some of you not so much, perhaps, and that's fine. So Excel is a little bit clever. I wouldn't say it's fully intuitive, but Excel will pick up on patterns. If I want to do 100 strips, if I just highlight the 0, 1 here, Excel will recognize that I'm just adding 1 each time. If I drag that down now, it will just continue to add 1 for me. So you don't need to type every number in. So as I go, I'm just going to go down to 100. It can get a bit crazy when you're moving down. Once you've done it once, so it'll know where to stop. I did have a title cell, so I'm going to go to 101. You can see the little box there that says 99. That's telling me I'm only going to get to 99, so I need to go one more. There's my 100. It will highlight those. Now my X values, I want them to pretty much do the same thing. I want them to add on the width each time. So I'm just going to drag those down. But because I've already dragged down to 100, I don't actually have to drag down. I should be able to just double click and it will do it for me. Double click on that little black box. I want to do my Y values the same as well. Double click on the little black box. But the problem is at the moment that my upper bound is 10 and my lower bound is 9. And this is going beyond 10. It's got an X value beyond 10. So I might just rezone this, make my upper bound 2 again and my lower bound 0. Okay, but you can see what's happened here is it's going 0, 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, because I haven't changed my number of strips. I want to have 100 strips. So if I change my number of strips to 100, it now changes the width of each strip to 0.02. It does all my 100 calculations for me, and then it puts it into the trapezoidal rule and gives me an estimation of the area. Which doesn't look very right to me. Because I have not finished, I haven't actually updated this formula here, have I? So if I delete that and delete that. Okay, so my area here, my endpoints now have changed. I've got C2 and C102. And my sum goes, in my middle points go from C3 to C101. And there's my area, 16.6668. Now I'm guessing if we actually do the calculation using integration, we'll get 16 2/3. And if I do 100 strips of trapezoidal wool, I get an answer that's very, very close to for the fourth decimal point is where it first changes, which is pretty good. So you might show in your assignment an example of doing it pen on paper for 4 or 6 strips, but then you will probably refer to Excel for the rest of it, okay? When you pick your function, if I go into here, you can still use the normal functions like cos. If I type in cos, I think a few of them involve cos, I get COS comes up here, so return to cosine of an angle. You can use the cos function. If I type in exp, you can use the exponential function. So if you want to do e to the power of 2x, you have to type exp. And then if I want to do e to the power of 2, I type in exp2, and it does e squared for me. Okay, but keep in mind that's telling me it's got to start with an equals, exp, and it has a little box here that says returns e raised to the power of a given number. That will do that calculation for you. Are there any questions? You have got time in class on this. I would like you to do some of that work on trapezoidal rule, but my suggestion to you right now will be get your laptops out, choose your function for part 1 of the assignment, and start building a spreadsheet. Typing up your Word document is going to be a low-level thing for you to do. I'm just going to stop the video.